I was going to get my daughter from daycare, another exhausted day, not doing enough at the work, not doing enough at home, just falling short. And I was like, I want to drive my car into that retaining wall. And I always say, I don't even know if it was to kill myself. It might have been just so I could get a coma and a break. And I've never met a working parent of any kind, much less a mother, that is like, what? That's crazy. Instead, they're all like, yeah, girl, me too.
Meet Kacie Lett Gordon, co-founder of It All Media. We discuss burnout, motherhood, identity, and what it really means to have it all in a world built on hustle. Welcome to the Purpose Profit Shift, where real stories about bold shifts illuminate how we can create a new economy. I'm your host, Rachel Bernier-Green, social entrepreneur, activist, and founder of Thrivo Financial Advisory, formerly known as Economic Justice Consortium, a finance consulting firm designed to help purposeful businesses change the world. So, Kacie, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I am super excited to talk to you, and I have had the pleasure to learn a little bit about your company as I've been researching for this episode. But I would love for you to just ground our guest with a little bit of context about who you are and what It All Media does.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Rachel. I'm excited to be here and always love the chance to sit and chat to other like-valued founders and creators in this space and just hear about the converging perspectives. As you mentioned, I'm the co-founder of It All Media. So I say I'm one half of a storytelling and coaching engine that is all around women rewriting the narrative of what it means to quote unquote have it all, and doing that in a way or through the vision of a world where women are equal and valued architects of the systems that run our lives at work, at home, and in our communities. And two different sides of the spectrum and converging towards each other. The first is the individuals. So individual coaching, women in transition of any kind of circumstance, mindset, career, life stage, motherhood, empty nester, you name it. And allowing them to go inward, define their own value set, success, what they're after, and then a sustainable plan to create it. So that's the individual work we do. And then on the other side of the spectrum is the systemic work. So that's the media part of it all, is the storytelling engine. Everything from podcasts to executive producing and stage performances and live activations and film, where we are talking about the systemic stories that need to change, where women are the main characters, the authors, the narrators, and how we do that at a collective level. So we always say our work is individual to collective and collective to individual. And ideally, those two worlds converge to create the vision we have.
I absolutely love that. So one of the most fascinating things about your story is that before It All Media existed, you were living what a lot of people would call the dream. So you were a senior VP at a big innovation firm. You'd scaled a $10 million practice and co-founded the largest innovation community in the Southeast. And so take me back to what that world looked like and what it felt like before everything shifted.
Yeah, such a great question. It's funny. So I now have been an entrepreneur as long as I held that last kind of body of work, that last role in company. And for so long, I kept saying, when I introduced myself, I would lead with all these things I had done. And then now I have a company, and only recently have I reoriented into my full identity as entrepreneur. So even though it has been, over 6 years ago, it's still very fresh in a lot of ways. Just to kind of ground people into my pathway to innovation, because that can be a big word that means a lot of things to a lot of people.
Right.
I studied journalism undergrad, realized I love media and storytelling. I did not want to be reporting on the traffic at 4 a.m. in Tulsa. No hate on Tulsa. I love, small towns, but that wasn't what I wanted when it actually came time to doing journalism, at least broadcast in practice. I went back to school or continued my education and got a master's in interactive media. So I say it was enough to be dangerous at all the things, but not, it was enough to have a language across different media. And at the time, 2011, 2012, things were shifting digital first with that they weren't there yet. So it was very much at that precipice, and I'm grateful for that. And I think in hindsight, that's been a lot of the trends in my career is just ahead of where things are naturally going, maybe on a culture perspective, feeling a bit alone in a sense of how did I get here first? Am I crazy? And then finding company as there's momentum. Moved to Atlanta, started in traditional advertising. Again, a lot of my clients at the time were responding to like existential crisis and threat. This was retail responding to Amazon, healthcare
Mhm.
responding to the fact that like the patient was much more empowered in this digital health journey. So that was essential to the work to innovation because I really started with just networking in the Atlanta community at the time. It was a product and tech company. And I was talking to all these people, these individuals that were having an existential crisis. Very personally, they were inside of corporate. They had, all of the things that we know are the good and bad of golden handcuffs. They had all the
Mhm.
security, they had the income, the insurance, families, all of that. And they were interested in either building or in this new startup kind of new venture space, but they didn't have the actual support mechanism. So the company would say, yes, go build that crazy thing, but we're going to give you no budget, no timeline. You better hit your goals in 90 days
Yeah.
because the quarterly reports are coming out. So there was so much volatility. And, yes, there was one aspect of it from a business development perspective. I wanted to figure out ways in which we could serve these people. But there was also just an interest of, okay, something is happening here, and these people are really isolated and lonely. And if this doesn't work out, their careers have a lot of turbulence. And so that was the
Mhm.
birth of that innovation community. It was like, I'm interested in this and how it's happening. And what does it look like from an upskilling perspective and a network? And how do you tell this executive what this team is doing so they maybe have
Right.
confidence? So there was a lot of like the EQ in there. And I think that when people hear like innovation, they immediately go to like the building of something. For me, it was really interested in the mindset and the sustainable support mechanisms that allowed people to pursue this kind of work. So that's how we got there.
Can you define EQ for our listeners who might not be familiar with that term?
Yeah. So if you think about IQ is around intelligence,
Right.
EQ is around emotional intelligence. So the ability, a lot of times these are deemed soft skills, but really, I think, especially, and we can go on a whole tangent around AI and the rapid adoption in our space. But I think that it's EQ that is really going, always has been important, but it's going to continue to separate or advance ourselves in the work we do.
Yes. That is so true. And I appreciate you bringing that up because I think that as we dig deeper into your story, that piece of it, we're going to see that kind of come back to the forefront time and time again. And so just wanted to make sure that everyone listening has that is grounded in that same context and
Yeah.
understanding. And so
Yes. I
go
also
ahead.
go ahead, please.
Oh, no, you.
I was going to say, I don't know if I gave you your full answer to like what my life looked like in that role before things fell apart. I think I wanted to paint the picture of getting there because one, it's been nonlinear. And I think that a lot
Mhm.
of times when we hear this kind of whether it's title or job or salary, whatever it's an assumption that like that was a clear pathway. And I guess I would
That's
say
very
every single time I was invited to the next thing, which was great, but I kind of stumbled in it, in hindsight, made a lot of sense. There was a lot of connective dots, but at the time, not nearly as intentional as it sounds now.
I appreciate you raising that because I I think that that is way more common than we
For
acknowledge,
sure.
but it's
Mhm.
not talked about nearly enough.
Right. Exactly.
You had, this career, and even if it wasn't linear, your path to it from the outside looking in, it looked like kind of the epitome of success. And you had the house and the marriage and the baby, and everything seemed like it was, from the outside looking in,
Yeah.
going swimmingly. But when was the first time you noticed that something wasn't working? And were there any early warning signs that you felt like you ignored before you got to the kind of breaking point that you mentioned?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would love to say, like, no, it was all great. And then a switch flipped. No, I think that I had been hearing it that something was off for a long time, but I hadn't been listening.
Mm,
So I think that's a distinction of, we hear these things, whether it's our body or our mind or spirit, that something's off. But we don't often listen to it and give it the credit that it
Yeah.
is. And I think especially as young people in our careers, we assume others know more. As women in our careers, we're adapting into very, masculine or
Yes.
patriarchal systems. And so we quiet the part of ourselves that says something is not right, thinking that we just work harder or, get more focus or whatever the supplement or anecdote that would do it. So I would say, let's see, when I was 25, I remember the first time that I really had like a mental health kind of episode of sorts.
Mm-hmm.
I've been incredibly, I'm now 30, I'll be 37 this year. So I was very much in that millennial girl boss, you can do it all, like college is
Yes.
options, you work hard, I'm a middle class white family. So like we have to recognize all the cultural and societal things that we're saying, like you
Yes.
can do it. And so achievement and accomplishment had absolutely been a currency. And if you think about high school, it's to college, college, it's to grad school's a job. So there
Mm-hmm.
was always, and the first time I had really, I think this existential questioning when I was about 25, I had been promoted very quickly. I had been, on to the next thing. And there hit a point in life where there was just kind of a lull. There wasn't necessarily something big to work towards. I was in a relationship that was stable. And I remember going to a therapist and she's like, honey, this is life. You're living. Like, it's
Hmm.
just like, it's not always the next thing so urgently. And so that was a reprogramming for sure. And I remember,
Right.
I didn't know what a regulated nervous system looked like without those dopamine hits of what's next.
That is a powerful statement that is resonating with me so deeply.
Yes. I don't know about you, Rachel. I find that the lessons I've learned once, I continue to learn about 40 different times,
Oh,
just at
yes.
different intensities or kind of peeling of
Mm-hmm.
the layer. In some ways, it's comforting because we've been here before. In other ways, it's just like, girl, are you ever going to get it? Are you going to stop? So that was the first, I would say,
You're in good
reckoning I
company.
had. Yeah, exactly. The second came, I think one of the things I always have been good at is following my organic interest. And
Mm-hmm.
so, I'm a communications major. Like I know how to communicate. And I think that's such an important thing. So I've always been able to build a business case around why something might be interesting or why it's worth pursuit. So I think through I left my last job in 2019 into 2020. So I would say around like 2016, 2017. So this is really 10 years now. We're recording this in 2026. This is over like 10 years. I've had some like underlying questioning. Um, I started, looking at something to do with women. I realized that that was a skill set, and an interest I had. I was building an all sales team that was all women. That was new. I was used to being the only woman or the youngest.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was internalizing these and saying, like, how do I use these positions to do it a little differently? I worked with a great coach and she gave me these three kind of beacons, if you will, of my work. And I say that because there's many times I've been restless and I've found that anytime I can separate or remove the pressure of external and say, okay, can I set up my own like spectrum goals of sorts or ways that I want to feel about my work and myself or personal growth? It buys me a little time. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that it helps me really tune into what needs to change versus just a reactive, like something's off, let me blow things up. And the three things she gave me were connect people, create value, and change what it means to be a woman in business.
Mm.
I have always been in sales. I loved that connection part of it, but sales can sometimes get a transactional, icky feel.
Yeah.
So I felt like if I was creating value, then there was this kind of like perpetual pipeline, right? That I
Mm-hmm.
could, if I was known as that person, oh my gosh, give Kacie a call. She can be of value. Then that would give me the seats at the table to ultimately change what it meant to be a woman in business. So that satiated me for about 2 years, 2017 to 2019. And during that time, I knew I wanted to consider becoming a mother. I knew that journey for some can be very easy, for some very complex. So I knew I wanted to create space. Ended up, getting pregnant with my daughter and having her in 2019. As I went on maternity leave, I was simultaneously promoted to SVP.
Oh,
And that
wow.
sounded so great. in
Intense
theory, but
timing, though.
your eyebrows just told me what it was in reality because it was wild.
So you have talked about kind of that moment where,
Mhm.
and you've coined it as your F it all moment, where
Yeah.
you were 6 months postpartum and you felt like it all came crashing down. So can you take us there? And what was the breaking point like?
Yeah. I I am used to I have been used to just being a really high performer. And I think high performer for me meant a ton of energy, a ton of capacity,
Hmm.
no to-do list too long. It was really tied to like output and productivity.
Yes.
Um, Even though now I can look back and be like, yeah, there were parts of that were misaligned, but I could, just give me enough caffeine and I can keep going kind of thing. Parenthood can be a really great equalizer because it
Oh,
removes
yes.
so many of these like crutches that we have or that we like,
Hmm.
you know, put our body through. And one, during the time I had off, the company was going through a lot of transition. There was, team restructuring, layoffs, hiring. It was just a lot of change in an organization. And so I have
Okay.
empathy for that at the macro. But I also was going through tremendous change.
Right.
Um, I had now spent time at home where my only job, for that period of time was keeping this person alive, keeping myself
Hmm.
alive, and like just being in the natural rhythms of early newborn and motherhood days.
Right.
Um, and as I went back to work, it was like this confronting reality of like, wait, I've never been this person in the office while also being this person at home. And my
Hmm.
capacity looks so different. I think that for those that want to go back into the traditional workforce, I think it's can be so empowering and have that separate identity. I know I'm a better at-home mother when I have that independent identity
Same.
for myself.
Yeah.
However, I think the lack of infrastructure in that transition period does so many parents wrong. And it
Hmm.
ultimately, for me, I was on a plane almost immediately leaving. My milk supply dried up at 4 months.
Oh,
So that
man.
was, a goal I had for myself. And I wasn't a purist, but I wanted to be able to still have that connection point at the end of the day. And
Yeah.
so that was happening. Then, my daughter didn't sleep. God love her. So not only
Oh,
was I, having the natural, just like energy exhaustion of making milk or not making milk, and but then not sleeping. And I had a partner that also worked full time. And so these are two big lives, a household, the care of this new person, and then just like my baseline health, not being the same.
right.
And I think that it was, we have so much more public dialogue on these systemic breaks now, but this was 2019, 2020. This was still very much the like perfect Instagram reel. Everybody's got it
Yes.
figured out life. So I think that it's, we lose sight of how recent that kind of shift in our public dialogue was. But that was only not even 7 years ago that was happening. And so I felt completely crazy. And I remember going to lunch with a girlfriend who she chose to be an at home, work inside the home. And I'm so
Mhm.
intentional now about not saying stay at home because I'm like,
Yes.
there is no staying
Work
when you
inside the
choose to
home.
be inside the home.
That's the
And I
correction.
remember at the time thinking like, girl, don't give this up. Don't give your freedom up. Don't get, there was so many like now naive and like societally enforced narratives of
Yes.
like, but you have an education and you have this. And then I remember 6 months later, I was going to get my daughter from daycare, another exhausted day, not doing enough at the work, not doing enough at home, just feeling like
Yeah.
falling short. And I was like, I want to drive my car into that retaining wall. And I always say, I don't
Mm.
even know if it was to kill myself. It might have been just so I could like get a coma and a break. And I'm like,
Just for things to
let's be
stop.
real. Yeah, just for the pause. And I've never met a working parent of any kind, much less a mother, that is like, what? That's crazy. Instead, they're all like, yeah, girl, me too.
Yeah.
And
Which
so
tells us that
that,
something is profoundly broken.
right. I'm like, that should not be the baseline that we all have a common knowledge of.
Yeah.
So that was December of 2019. I was 6 months postpartum, to your point. I was going into the holidays and I just remember coming home to my husband that day and, thank God for good partners and
Hmm.
said, like, this can't sustain. Like, I'm I'm not well. So the first was, the baseline. Let's take some time. Let's go to therapy. Let's get a good night's sleep. Let's get medicated if we need, like all of the
Yes,
baseline. And then COVID came in the spring. And
I
so
know. As soon as you said that
then
timing, my heart just dropped because we
I
all know what happened
know,
next.
I know. That was, December 2019. And by I would say, January, February, I did something for myself that I've now coined and do with all my clients, which is called a peace of mind plan. It's easy for everyone to say, like, girl, you're unhappy, just leave. But it's like, no, if I can't pay my mortgage or put groceries on the table, then
Right.
I don't
I will
have peace
also
of
be
mind.
unhappy.
Exactly. And so there was some like very brass tacks things that had to be true in order for me to walk away and actually take a true break, pause, reset. And
Mhm.
so I am very specific. I really believe in talking numbers publicly. For me, it was 50,000 cash in the bank. Like I wanted to know that all bills could be paid comfortably, including contributions to college fund, paying on our insurance comfortably for 6 months. And that, for I think some can be overkill. That was what I knew I needed to take 3 months off and just
Mhm.
have a minute. So that year was spent building that peace of mind plan. I didn't know if I was going to leave, but I knew that I needed some sort of reset. COVID obviously threw a ton of uncertainty. We didn't know if my husband's job would be secure. We didn't know if my job would be secure. So there was a lot
Yeah.
of like, hold on and let's just wait and see. Fortunately, I think the rest of the world was also in a bit of hold on, let's wait and see, let's get
Yes.
through. By September of that year, I did leave. Leaving was for lack of a better word, very messy breakup. It was, a
Mhm.
company I had been at for a long time. I joke lovingly now that it was like the Italian family restaurant. There was a lot of emotions and a lot of like connectedness. And so
Yeah.
it was challenging. I also know that had it not gotten to a point where it had personally felt untenable, I never would have left.
Yes, and that's so
And
often the
so
case.
Mhm. And I think we have to remember that when like things start really, really falling apart, it's the best thing, kindest thing we can do is to let go versus this like visceral holding on. And it's so counterintuitive. And, I left almost, 9 months or so after my first mental health and kind of reckoning there. And the next, 9 months were just as chaotic. And I mean, they were
Mm.
inspiring and raw and creative, but they were also so, so hard and identity shifting and heartbreaking and like, you know, broke me open in all the ways.
Yeah, so let's talk about that identity shift because I think that that is it's a really common part that women that I've had on the podcast as guests have described, and I know that I personally, when I left my last corporate role, that I worked toward that for years, and there
Yeah.
was part of me that my identity was tied up in my profession, and so it felt a lot it was much more emotionally laden, kind of as you're describing, than just leaving a job because it was, who am I if I am not in this role? If I am not in this profession, what does that mean for my worth and my value? And so I love to just kind of explore what that looks like for different people because I know so many listeners feel alone when they go through those identity transitions. And so the more that we can give voice to others going through similar moments, I think that we can normalize this and maybe even encourage a new generation of women to begin their careers with their identities detached in some ways from
Hmm.
their careers.
Wouldn't that be healthy
Right.
for any of us? It's such a layered question because I think there's been multiple evolutions even from that
Oh, for
initial
sure.
departure of, full-time corporate work, certain titles, salary, circles, etc. And I think it's not just, yes, we tie our own identities to it, but we have to recognize that we are also a part of systems and communities and social circles that also, for better or worse, intentionally or not, also tie our worth to those things.
Yeah.
And so not only are you, it's one thing to do the internal work and grieve that. It's another to move through the external world and recognize that, you know, you may not hold the same values to certain people. Certain circles
Hmm.
may not invite you in or celebrate you the same way, not because something's wrong with you, but because they're also programmed that way. And I think that has been one of the hardest parts because oftentimes when we talk about this internal kind of, I would put in air quotes like self help, self growth work, there's a sense of like, and the world will applaud you for it. And that's not always the case.
Yeah.
It's really hard. I I think that, and I'm curious your perspective because I know we all arrive at our achievement dogmatic approach, for lack of better words, in our own way. But for me, I don't think I saw evolution. I don't think I saw a misalignment of reality and expectations as an evolution. I think I saw it as a failure.
Oh, 100%.
And
Yes.
the go-to questioning I would have for myself, if I arrived somewhere and my expectation did not meet the reality, it would not be, what changed? It would be, what did you do wrong?
Yes.
And in some ways, if you think about it, that can be a self-protection mechanism because if it's my fault, then I can fix it and I'm in control of my own death. There's a lot of that.
Hmm.
But it can also be, you're taking blame for something, one, that may not need blame. It just could be, it
Right.
is the nature. And two, is maybe not yours to take. And
Yes.
so I found that, my identity, some things, again, I think it's important to ground like in the original stories. I was the first in my immediate family to do a traditional 4-year degree. So there's a certain like, you're doing it. There's a lot of hopes and dreams placed on that.
Yes.
I was the first of my immediate family to move far away. All of my family was based in Virginia. I moved to Atlanta. So there was a lot of like breaking out and the identity that I not just carried in my title, but also of like, wow, I'm the one doing things different. I'm the one
Yes.
doing things the traditional way or the
The one
safe,
who's
bigger
made
way,
it.
so many of these things. And I don't even think I realized that these were like, just little pieces of the armor that I like put on and tied on, but I did.
Hmm.
And I wore them so proudly. And so as I started to go through my career, I was promoted very quickly. I was a vice president, of a consulting firm before I was 30. I was, making $200,000 very early. Like there, so I think that there's like, yes, there is some narrative there. There also was some like very
Right.
tangible things that did that. And so as I started to say like this doesn't feel right, I think oftentimes yourself and people around you want you to be able to point at something really, really wrong. Like, oh, is it discrimination? Or, oh, is it this? Or, are you not being promoted? And I'm thinking to myself, like, no, actually, I think I'm getting everything that someone could want in this.
Yeah.
It is just not aligned. And I hear that a lot of times with like relationships, like, oh, are they abusive? Or, oh, are they this? And
Right.
when
We immediately
somebody's just
jump
like, no,
there.
I just don't want to be there anymore. And it's
Yeah.
almost like it's only permissible if there's something so egregious that we forgive a woman for choosing herself. And that is, I mean, and again, I don't think any of this is like, I'm not trying to point fingers because I don't even think any of this is conscious that we make. I think these are like so subconscious, so deeply embedded in us that we don't even
Yeah.
realize the line of questioning and how that makes the recipient feel.
Very true. That's very true. And also a very gracious way to think about it. Not assuming that people are, intentionally being shameful or judgmental, that
Yeah.
we just have all of this conditioning
Yes.
that yeah,
Yes.
that we've all been privy to, and that you have to
It's so
intentionally unpack before your
so
subconscious stops
true.
spewing it out.
Completely. And I know that that's true because I know I've said those things and I would never intentionally. But like I said to my friend
Right.
that day, like, oh my God, girl, like, what are you giving up? How dare I? That's none of like, that just assumed her value was outside of the home. That assumed her
Yes.
value. I think something I've realized in the past few years doing a lot of like therapy work, but also I'll say like woo work. I put in air quotes. A lot of people do it for me. It's not, but ancestral work is I come, especially on my maternal side, I come from a long line of women whose husbands left and left them in financial despair. with a bunch of children.
Mm.
And so there is a sense that career independence very much gave me a sense of independence. It gave me the permission to say, I don't have to belong to anyone. And at the first time, one of the identities that I am very actively grappling with is we're all told that we're like strong, independent women, right?
Right.
And then I now have entered into a partnership with my husband. I have two children. I think any parent feels this. You don't have a sense of independence when you have two young people or any young people depending on you. I have, to pay bills and put groceries on the table. And like, so this sense of like independence versus interdependence and acceptance that interdependence doesn't mean that I am not autonomous, that I don't have sovereignty, but that I am choosing to be a part of these other systems. And therefore the interdependence. And so that's parts that I give, but it's also parts that I receive.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reciprocity in that. That is really like at a very like cerebral level for me, it screws with my mind because that is then an acceptance of the roles I'm playing. So the first time that I felt really strong as a mother, the first time that I felt all these like hyper feminine qualities and not like girly, but feminine in the sense of like this, abundance and like caregiving and caretaking and being solid for my kid, I wanted to deem those weak because they
Mm.
weren't these like masculine, forward, progress, direct. And so there was this identity crisis of like the feminine masculine as well inside of me because I had been
Yes.
existing, many of us do, in hyper masculine systems. And
Yes.
so that just as much as the career piece has been. And so I bring the 360 because always women come to me as a coach through the lens of career. And I have yet to meet anyone whose career symptom is not a root of a personal problem or challenge. And so I think for so many of us, we have to integrate these two conversations because if something is feeling off, like we are interconnected beings, like all of this
Yes.
is matters.
So tell me, I would love to learn how you kind of go from having this essential crisis, because there was like the crisis of identity, the crisis of balancing. You knew that you had to step away. And most people do not start businesses from this place. So, kind of
Yeah.
walk me through the moment you decided you needed to do something with all of this instead of just survive it.
Yes. I would love to say similarly to the career pivots that I had a vision. I think so my goal was to take 3 months off and I was like, I'm gonna do nothing. I had, certain job conversations going and I said, like, I'm gonna pause everything. I think I need 3 months to recalibrate. I didn't know what that meant. It's funny, everybody assumed they said, that's so nice. You're staying home with your daughter. And no, she's gonna go to daycare and I'll see her in the evenings when I pick her up. This is time for me to like process. So
Yes.
just again, the narratives that are handed and then the guilt and shame to say, oh my God, should I be staying home with
The guilt and the
her?
shame.
It's so fun. So 6 days into my sabbatical, I was really angry. Like I said, the departure from my last company was messy and I was really angry. And I was angry because I felt like, are we allowed to cuss on this podcast? It's okay if
Yes.
not. Okay. I realized but there was this sentiment of like, are you fucking kidding me? I just did a decade of grinding and I paid off $100,000 in student loan debt. And I like worked really hard to be like the
Yeah.
primary earner in my family while my husband had like pursued entrepreneurship. And I had like, gave my body to this kid. And now I can't even like pee normal. It was like
Yeah.
all these things that were just like, are you freaking kidding me? And so like
Right.
the rage was so real. And I had done everything they said that would give me peace.
Mhm.
And this refrain of like, fuck it all kept rolling around, like the quote unquote it all, but also like everything. Like, I believe in
Yes.
nothing. This was COVID. This was the summer after George Floyd's death. This was great resignation. I was just like, what is life? What is all of this?
Yeah.
Um,
It was a deeply
and I
unsettling
think that
time.
most of us were there, like, right? Like most of us that were awake in our lives were there and have continued, I think, the awakening over the past 6, 7 years. For me, the 6 days after, I just thought, I need a creative project. I was,
Mm.
I was a writer. I was a journalist by training. And I had feel in many ways I had put the creative version of me away. And I remember early days, like truly the first few weeks, I said, like, I woke up one morning, I just thought to myself, I will never again go where creative Kacie cannot come.
I
And
love
that,
that.
like, I don't even think I knew she was missing. You know what I mean? Like, I don't, if
Mm,
you had asked me 6 months before when I was grappling with this about creativity, I'm like, yeah, that's great. But it was so clear. So I just wanted to start writing. I wanted to start talking about that. And so my now co-founder, but best friend at the time, had just recently moved to Thailand. She had had her own FIA moment, leaving a long-term relationship, pursuing an international job change. Like there was a lot of shift. And so our lives could not look more different. Me, a new mom, having left my job, staying at home, her, a single woman moving to Thailand to pursue, humanitarian work. But we were having these like epiphanies back and forth
mhm.
of like, and then I thought it would be like this, and it's not. And did you know that, we were like just working on 24-hour or 12-hour time differences, waking up to each other's musings. And I thought, she's choosing herself. She has found a
Yeah.
community of women. She's not saying, oh my God, like everyone else did in Charleston, South Carolina, is that your chance at a family? She's saying, like, no, I trust that that will be there if it needs to be. And I thought it was a little like Harry Met Sally. I'm like, I'll have what she's having. Like, I want that energy. And
Yes.
so I thought, I just want to have 10 conversations with women that are having this. And I look back now and like, it was so, I don't really know what my intention was with it. It must have been something that wanted to be birthed because, and I very much believe in that. But I reached out to my network. I bought a logo on Etsy for $5, got permission to use it with a middle finger. I sent a email to my network and just said like, hey, I'm doing a creative project. I want to talk to 10 women that are having what I'm calling fuck it all moments. And I
Mhm.
want to talk about these stories, whether it's career, life, whatever. And I gave some of my own anecdotes in there. In a week, I had a backlog of 100 stories.
Wow.
People were so hungry for this. So think about it again. COVID, Black Lives Matter, George Floyd, Great Resignation, layoffs.
Yes.
It was a wild time. And people were at home and people were so hungry to talk. And for women, the podcast that I originally started, there was no video because I said I don't want what a woman has to say to be directly correlative to how put together she is.
Mm.
I want her
Yeah.
to show up with her hair in a bun, not showered today because the kids are doing homeschool in the other room, in her closet because the acoustics are nice with the cloud and us to just, or with the
Yes.
clothes and us to just have this conversation. And there was just it was amazing in hindsight because there were so many creative, sparks flying and people that were just so eager to help and saw what this could be and a belief in it. And I did the first season and I just recorded and I played in, podcast editing. It was so like wonderful in the sense I can look back. I was having an existential crisis every other day, let me tell you. Like my poor family. There were so many like ups, highs, lows. What are we doing with this? Is this a job? Are we looking for a job? It was wild. But then by January, so that was like, October, November, December, I toyed with this, just let it breathe. And by January, I thought, I think this could be something. I don't know what it is,
Yeah.
but like, I want to just keep talking to women about this. And so I called my best friend, now co-founder. She had just returned to the States. And I said, hey, I think this is something bigger. I think this is, um, she had always wanted to do specifically work with women. I said, I think this could be just something around, women specifically. I think I'm doing grounded theory research. I think I'm getting a bunch of intel that I didn't have. I don't know what to do with it, but would you consider moving to Atlanta and doing this with me? And very fortunately, I call her my down to clown friend because it can be, do you want to move to Atlanta and start a company? Or, hey, I'm going to pick you up in 3 hours and we'll go to the beach. But she said yes. And she moved here and I'm looking outside. She lived in my carriage house out back for 3 years while we built the initial inception of It All Media, which was really rooted in media and storytelling to begin. I think that if
Yeah.
we you look in the world today, the Crookeds, the Unwells of the world, we aspire to be that of
Mm-hmm.
women's storytelling, of narrative work there. We can get into how that's evolved, but those led to other fuck it all moments of what the expectation was versus the reality. And when it's all on you as a founder and as an entrepreneur, there's a different weight and battles that happen inside
Yes.
your mind and spirit.
So let's talk about that, the weight of all of that as an entrepreneur. And well, actually, before we get to that, because there's something that really stood out to me about how intentional you've been as you've been building this company, where you're starting your days at 10 a.m. and working fewer days per week. And I love in your email signature how you just have that call out to say that, basically that being like anti-hustle culture is not a buzzword, that it is a practice. And that part of that practice is that you all have these days a week where you're at work. Be patient with us, we'll be back. And I absolutely love that because that's something that we aspire to do. But can you talk a little bit about why you decided in the midst of all of this to build this company and just refuse to play by the hustle culture rules?
Go back and forth with this often. I think that I think I'm a systems thinker through and through, for better or worse. I mean, sometimes at my
Mhm.
own fucking annoyment, I'm like, just do the thing. Stop thinking so like big about how it is. And that can all the way be to, what's our system for making dinner this week? But I think that I thought, what are all the points? And I'm going to sit with women all day that are breaking at the
Yeah,
hands of really, really detrimental systems that were not designed for us or by us, not just
right.
like at not at like a do good level, but at like an actual physiological level. They were
Yes.
not built by us or for us. And so it's not even a matter of, you know, um, do I morally think this is right? It's like, no, at like a scientific level, this is not right for
Yes.
us. And so I think it's that. I think one, it's that. And so the more education has been so powerful for me, especially over the past few years, because then I can, to me, that's the power of systems thinking is if you can understand a premise of something, then I don't have to stay and teach you all the way to the nth degree. But now the
Mhm.
premise is understood and you're going to internalize that in your own way. And so for me, the things, as I started to go through my weeks and my days, and trust me, we've had periods of overproduction, burnout, thinking that more
Absolutely.
hours, and a lot of this is born out of you initially think, oh, it was the corporate world that did that. So then you just go and you create the same shitty system, but for yourself. And then you're like, but I'm the boss. Why am I doing this to myself? So
Yes.
there's a lot of that. I think that, Katie and I, 2023, I had my second daughter in 2024, and she and I did an exercise. And, I think both of us we're very cerebral in a lot of ways. I think, again, for better or worse, like we're in our heads a lot. And we had been building the very traditional media company, build a big audience, own your audience, go to, networks. And then because you have that audience, you now get permission to have. So it's all based on hierarchy of ownership, of authority, and these things that didn't feel always good in our bodies to do. Like it would be, when you're forcing yourself. And for me, entrepreneurship has become such a attunement to my naturally occurring energy because I know when things flow versus when it's like grind and pushing it through. And I think grind, something that I have to remind myself, grinding when you still get a paycheck at the end of every 2 weeks has a different energy than grinding and not being compensated because you're an entrepreneur building something.
Mhm.
So it's like I might be grinding and burnout and kind of coast. And not that I promote that of grind, but I could do that and my bills are still getting paid. Well, now when I grind and burnout, I'm actually out of work for 2 weeks, 3 weeks
Yes.
in a different way. And so I think sustainability has been a part of this. The system piece, I feel like I can't really tell people or advise them or invite them to do something different if I'm not willing to do it myself.
Mhm.
I think that also in doing it myself, that's, I don't regret my corporate career in any way because it
Yeah.
gave me so much credibility to talk to the women that I do now about those
Yes.
transitions. And if I didn't had that, there are amazing coaches, but if they did not have that same lived experience, I don't know that the credibility is there or the understanding or the empathy or the just the deep ways that we just take on these identities. And so I think that that's a lot of it. And I think that, when I say to people like, okay, well, what would happen if you didn't work on Thursdays or you didn't respond to emails on Fridays? And they're like, I can't. I'm like, I know that you feel that way, but here's what it was. And it took 3 weeks
Yeah.
for this to happen. So a lot of these are lived experiences and experiments meant to invite others in and show like, okay, it can be possible. And I'll be real with you. I think that we are in this cross between of two worlds right now. I think there is the existing world that we've known for a really long time that requires the things that you and I are sitting here saying are unhealthy, toxic, dangerous, etc. And the people that usually say that you don't have to do these to be successful are already successful.
Yeah.
And then there's this emerging group, I think, of people that are led with impact and values and what is, the collective versus individual. What does it look like to put
Right.
humanity first? I think we're emerging. I think there's more of us. But I don't know that we fully cracked the code on how to still survive in these systems. And I
Yeah.
feel, I wrote last week, I think the existential crisis I have now is, and we can elaborate on this, but like, can the good guys win?
Yeah.
We're all aspirational in this, but I don't know. I mean, the experiment's not done, but I don't know what it looks like to win. And I say win to have peace of mind, to have resources, to be able to support our lives, to like
Yeah.
make sure our children are safe, to make sure our homes are, not crippling us into debt. Like all of these basic
Yes.
level things. And I don't know if that's possible. And that becomes really crisis inducing for me on the worst days.
Oh, well, I have to absolutely invite you then because I'm coming off of a week where I spent with different leaders from the B Corp movement. And there were hundreds of us at this retreat. And we got to see so many examples of businesses that are doing things the right way, that are building in this culture and finding out that I think that there's now over 11,000 B Corps, and that's not counting people who are formed as benefit corporations or L3Cs or other legal
Yeah.
structures that are incorporating these practices and have a human first and values driven approach to business. But we got to see so many examples of people who have fully embraced these values, absolutely thriving, from different size businesses, from solopreneurs
Amazing.
to the, Fortune 500. And I did not go to the conference for this reason, but the hope, I just feel buoyed by kind of the infectious spirit and the stories of being around every time I sat down next to someone, whether they owned a law firm or an architecture practice, or they were hiring reentering citizens, or they owned a farm, whatever it was, that people were values first and profitable. And I just wanted to go, I felt like I needed to go like shout it from the rooftops because we need
Seriously.
that, because
You
there are
do.
so many of us that are going this road and choosing this path that aren't formally connected to any movements that are doing the same. And we need that encouragement to not give up or to not get discouraged when we wonder, like, is this a viable path forward?
Yes. I don't know if you could hear just the exhales as I was hearing you. I felt like hope, like a blanket of hope,
Yes.
like okay. And I think I think it's a tension I feel so deeply is, to live in the impact space. And I won't even, and like, I think just personal, like human values first space. It takes a lot
Yes,
of work and a lot of discipline to really nurture that practice,
it does.
especially in a world that is like overrun with capitalism and patriarchy and consumer. Like, there's a
Mhm.
lot there. So it takes a lot of discipline and practice. And then to also build a business that is sustaining, so it's like these personal practices and then these business practices. And I think the community aspect, I think that's on my worst day, it's can we win? And I say win of just the people who are envisioning a different world. And on the best day, it's let me find more people and like see that it is possible or see what can be built in community. And I love that you brought that up. And that is what I want in my consumption feeds. That is what I want in my
Yes.
inbox. That is what I want on my social media. That is what I want in events that I go to.
Yes. I was frantically following people for that reason so
Yes.
that I can
Good news.
change.
Good
Yeah,
news.
exactly. And I mean, I also have in this space been to conferences and at this conference, free childcare at the conference.
That.
Where there's translation services available, accessibility services. There was a sensory room for people who were overstimulated where you could go. There were rooms with sound baths and there was yoga. There were people who got together and spontaneously went on nature runs. Um,
Makes me want to like tear up a little. Like it's so
yes,
idyllic. It's so like, doesn't that just sound nurturing and nourishing for like
yes.
the spirit?
It is such a difference between when I go to conferences that are like business as normal versus now I have a list of these conferences that I now consider kind of soul nurturing spaces. And so
Yes.
I go to them to learn and to network, but I also go to them because I just feel so rejuvenated after you know, spending time and space with people who, when I come up with a crazy idea and other people would roll my eyes and be like, what are you trying to save the world? Actually, yes. Actually, yes.
Yeah, I am.
So what now?
Exactly that. To me, I think I've been wrestling with this idea of ambition a lot lately. And I think what you just said is like the toxic version of ambition redirected.
Hmm.
Ambition based on like this external productivity, output, status, title. And not that those things have to be innately bad. They can,
Right.
they can represent recognition and they can represent influence and the ability to create change. But ambition to say, like, yeah, I want to be bold enough to envision a world that's better than the one we have.
Yes.
That also is ambitious.
Yeah. To just say that I refuse, that I,
Yes.
yeah, refuse to participate in to the extent that I can and uphold systems that are actively harming and actively killing us.
That, that, that. May I ask, how do you, so like you and I at our work and in our personal interest sit at this, in this space? I can imagine there's people in your close circle, maybe in your personal life, who haven't gone on this journey to this depth of like,
Yes.
and I'm curious, like how because for me, it feels like a paradigm shift. I cannot
Absolutely.
express to you the number of times that people have referenced like the Matrix. Like we have all taken it, we're seeing it and we can't go back. But
Yes.
there's still people in our circles, professional, personal, just the world who haven't.
Yeah.
And I feel like we are speaking not just like different dialects, but different languages. And I'm just
Mhm.
curious your like, I don't know, teach me do you have advice? Of how do you navigate that? Because I also find that can be really isolating. It can be heartbreaking when, the people that have been close to you aren't in those same places of growth or evolution.
Yeah. I mean, part of it, for better or worse, is that I have become sort of an evangelist for these causes. I think that a lot of the people, especially those that are close to me, that are values aligned, but maybe not in the same movement, it's not
Yeah.
because they don't want to be, but they might not be aware that there
Yeah.
are other options out there. And so that's actually part of the reason I started the podcast. It's part of the reason that I'm going to these conferences. And it's part of the reason I'm building this company, because I think, similar to what you said before, that building the story and showing people that we can thrive. I mean, we just renamed our company last week, partly for this reason, because we want to illustrate to people that you can thrive and be values aligned. So we even have um, programming in our company where we take people who maybe are just trying to survive in their business right now. And we actually have courses that teach them about the regenerative economy and different ways that they can incorporate values into their business. Because I think a lot of it is from ignorance, because this drive and this kind of feeling that something is, deeply and profoundly wrong with our current economic system, I think it's pervasive. And a lot of people are sitting with it
Yes.
and struggling with it, and they just don't know what to do. And so I see part of my work as cultivating that movement and throwing people that life preserver and saying, hey, look, we can do this differently. It's part of the reason that we are in the process to become a certified B Corp, because we want
Yeah.
to let people know that we are not just talking about these values, but that we are driven by them and that they are contributing to our success. And
Mm,
so it's, as you can tell, and I will get off my soapbox, it's something
no,
that,
stay. I'm loving it.
animates me very deeply. And like I've already come up with a list of people that the next time that this conference comes around that I'm planning to bring with me, and like
Yeah.
podcast guests that I need to go back to and say, hey, are you know, I know that you're not currently, certified here, or you're not currently doing this. Would you be interested in doing it? Because I think that it would add so much value to your life and help make this aspect of the work easier. And also balancing just having enough people that I'm consistently in community with, um, that like for our retainer clients, we only work with purpose driven companies. So like that is our kind of line in the sand, our red rope
Yep.
policy. And so then I make sure that whenever I'm in conversation with my clients, I am rejuvenated. We do have a program that is for more entry level businesses that we work with
Yeah.
anyone, and we use that to try to introduce people to those concepts.
Yeah.
But um, I find that I need to have, the people I can talk to and commiserate with when the work is
Yes.
hard, who
Yes.
I don't have to convince of anything, that immediately understand and say, hey, actually, fantastic idea. I know someone else who has done this. Let's go talk to them. Yeah, I just can't say how invaluable that is. And I'm finding so many people through the podcast that
Yes.
I'm building relationships with who are like minded, and that hopefully I can be that resource for them as well.
Yeah. As you were talking, you gave the life the life raft analogy where you're like
Yeah.
throwing out the buoys to say like, hey, this
Yeah.
is, you're drowning, you're feeling something, here's something to hold on to. A dear friend and collaborator, she's a coach of mine, her name is Andrea Berg. She has a consultancy really rooted in coaching practice, astrology, human design, inner child, called Nine Centered Culture. And one of the things that some of her work is rooted on is like, she has a course called Revolutionary, and it's knowing how to use your natural design to have showing up in the revolution. How do you show up in
Yeah.
this revolution? And revolution doesn't have to be war; it can be this shift in mindset. And like as you were
Mhm.
hearing that, to know that like, oh no, part of my role here is not just to be a practitioner, but to like be an on ramp to
Yes.
those that are curious. And I think that orienting and like what are the roles that I'm not just playing in my paid work, but how do I zoom out and say like this is the way that I'm supporting this change. I just, as you were saying that, it reminded me of that. It's a great reminder of like going back to, what is the role that each of us have and how do we be okay, and that's enough, that there doesn't have to be 20 more roles
Yes.
after that. There's an enoughness in that, and that also feels, regenerative.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And so I can't believe that we've been talking for almost an hour. It
I
has gone
know.
so fast. But as we are kind of wrapping up our conversation, I would love to know if you could go back and give your 6 months postpartum self one piece of advice, knowing what you know now, what would it be?
When you get the idea to do something, still take the 3 months off.
Hmm.
I meant to take 3 months. I took 6 days, and I've been building since.
Yeah.
And that's 3 months just from I just think there's so few times in our
Yes.
adult lives where we get true disconnect. And um, my co-founder, Katie, she often calls it like the time to just sit on the rock. Um,
Yeah.
I don't think I trusted that everything that was percolating would still be there
Hmm.
if I sat on the rock. And it's something I'm actively practicing now, that just because ideas come through doesn't mean that they will instantaneously combust and leave your body and run away and never be found again, that they are able to
Yeah.
come through. They're able to hang in the wings, and that the timing of that. And so there's many things I would tell her. I think I just give her like a big hug too of, this, you're transforming into something bigger and more meaningful than you even have the capacity to understand. And, both my daughters have been catalysts for that growth and that identity shift. And I think maybe leaning into the reverence of that moment versus just so much crippling fear and anxiety.
That's beautiful. That is beautiful. And it is really making me sit with the idea of how powerful the practice of sabbaticals can be. And, we've incorporated different things in terms of PTO into our company, but yeah, it's making me think seriously about incorporating sabbaticals as a practice and form of restoration as a necessary part of career paths in our company, because I think that is so true that there are very few opportunities for that to happen, but they are those spaces, the rejuvenation and creativity that can come from those spaces can be invaluable. Yeah. So I think.
Have you ever
Yeah.
had someone say that sabbatical wasn't really great? I've never
No.
heard anybody say that. I've always heard them say, it was amazing. I could have used more.
Right.
I was ready to come back. I felt inspired. I could hear myself think. I've never heard anyone begrudge them.
No, never.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is a beautiful point. And on that note, for everyone listening, this was an amazing conversation with Kacie Lett Gordon, the co-founder of It All Media, proving that the life you built doesn't have to be the life you keep. So if you are someone feeling that restless discontent, the sense that something's off, even when everything looks right, Kacie and the It All community might be your people. So you can head to itallmedia.co. You can subscribe to the F It All podcast wherever you listen, and you can follow their journey on Instagram at It All Podcast. And if you're a founder navigating these same questions about purpose, profit, and what success actually means, visit jointhrivo.com, where we're building community for leaders who refuse to choose between doing good and doing well. Until next time, keep shifting toward purpose and profit together. As always, if this conversation resonated with you, here's what you can do. Subscribe to the Purpose Profit Shift wherever you listen to podcasts. We've got episodes dropping regularly with more visionary founders and changemakers who are reshaping how business gets done. And if you found value in today's episode, leave us a rating and review. It helps other values-driven leaders find us. Until next time, keep leading with intention, scaling responsibly, and building businesses that matter. I'm Rachel Brunier Green, and this is the Purpose Profit Shift.